Today we're going to dig into a legal process that is uniquely Scottish. It's a system that's not built to find a villain, but to find answers after a tragedy happens. And its whole purpose is to make sure it never happens again.
Right, let's just dive straight in with a really fundamental question. When a life is lost out of the blue, especially in a way that makes you wonder, what went wrong? How should a society respond? More importantly, how do we actually learn from that loss?
And this idea right here gets to the absolute heart of Scotland's fatal accident inquiries, or FAIs. I mean, think about it. An air crash investigation. The goal isn't just to find one person to point the finger at, right? No, it's to figure out what went wrong with this system, the technology, the safety rules, so they can fix it and make sure it is impossible for it to happen again. That is exactly the philosophy we're talking about here. So let's get the official definition down. An FAI is a public fact-finding mission. It's led by a judge who in Scotland is called a sheriff. And the keywords you really want to lock onto are investigate, establish facts, and prevent future deaths. But look at what's not there. You don't see words like prosecute, or convict, or sentence. And that's because, and this is crucial, it is an inquiry, not a trial. Okay, so these inquiries don't just happen for every death. So you might be wondering, what actually triggers one? Well, it all comes down to two different categories, mandatory and discretionary.
And this is where you can see the two main paths to an inquiry. On the one hand, you've got this absolute legal requirement. These are cases where an inquiry has to be held, no ifs, ands, or buts. And on the other hand, you've got flexibility, the power to kick off an inquiry when it's just plain in the public's best interest to get some answers on the table.
Now, if you look at these mandatory cases, you start to see a common thread, right? They all involve situations where the state or some big organization had a direct duty of care, a death at a workplace, or in police custody, or a child in the care system. These things automatically, by law, trigger a public examination because those institutions hold such a huge responsibility.
And then you have this discretionary category. And this is what gives the system its power to respond to other really serious situations. This could be, say, a death in a hospital that might point to a bigger problem with how patients are being cared for, or really any other sudden death where the public just deserves to know what happened and what we can learn from it.
Okay, so let's say an inquiry gets the green light. Who's actually in the room? Who are the people involved in this search for facts?
Well, it really boils down to three key roles. First up, you've got the sheriff, who's the impartial judge steering the ship. Then you have the procurator fiscal, a really interesting figure we'll look at in just a second. And so importantly, you have the interested parties, and that group always includes the family of the person who died.
Now, this prosecutor fiscal role is absolutely fascinating because while they are public prosecutors, in an FAI, their job is completely different. They are not there trying to build a case against anyone. Instead, they're like the court's lead investigator. Their job is to gather up all the evidence, good, bad, everything, and present it to the sheriff to help figure out what actually happened. They're working for the public good. And this gets to what might just be the most humane, the most important part of this whole system. It's explicitly designed to give power back to the families. They're not just sitting on the sidelines watching. Through their lawyers, they can stand up, they can challenge evidence, and they can finally ask the questions that have been haunting them. It's all about giving them a voice. So what does one of these hearings actually look like? How does it all work? Let's walk through the process.
It's a very structured and very rigorous process. It kicks off with the procurator fiscal laying out all the known facts. Then witnesses are called. We're talking experts, eyewitnesses, you name it, and they give their testimony under oath. Then comes the crucial part. They get cross-examined by all the interested parties, and yes, that absolutely includes the family's legal team. And finally, everyone makes their closing arguments to the sheriff about what they think the evidence has really shown.
So after all that, after weeks or maybe even months of evidence, the inquiry wraps up. But what's the end result? What does it all lead to?
The outcome is this formal written document called the sheriff's determination. And it's not a verdict, it's not guilty or not guilty. It's a detailed report and it has to answer these specific questions. It's all focused squarely on what could have been done differently and what flaws in the system were there.
And this right here, this distinction is probably the single most important thing to understand. An FAI establishes facts. It does not assign legal fault. So it might conclude that, yeah, a certain precaution might have prevented the death,
but it will not say that failing to take that precaution was legally negligent. That's a question for a different court for a different day.
But, and this is a big but, you should not underestimate the power of these findings, because that official determination from a judge spelling out the precautions that could have been taken, well, that becomes an incredibly powerful piece of evidence if the family decides later to pursue a civil claim for compensation. It basically lays all the factual groundwork for them.
All right, so let's zoom out a little bit. When you put all of these pieces together, why is this system so important? What's the big picture here?
It really all comes down to a few core ideas. First, and maybe most importantly, it provides answers and a voice for grieving families. Second, it drives real learning, forcing organizations to fix broken systems so this stuff doesn't happen again. And third, it's about public accountability, shining a bright light on what went wrong.
But look, the system isn't perfect. One of the biggest criticisms, and it's a fair one, is delay. It can sometimes take years, actual years, for an inquiry to finish. And for the families who are just waiting for answers, that long, drawn-out wait can be an absolutely agonizing experience that just postpones any sense of closure.
So in the end, we're left with this really powerful thought. Is this kind of public, transparent examination the best tool we have for turning a tragedy into prevention? It's a system that's designed not just to look backwards at what happened, but to look forward, asking not who's to blame, but how do we make damn sure this never, ever happens again? And that is a profound shift in focus, away from just punishment and towards prevention.